Good morning, Connection Church. Oh, good, we're working. All right. We had a little troubles earlier with the mic, but we're good now. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming in today. I know we kind of had some nasty weather this weekend, but just thanks for coming out and, partaking in our service and braving the cold and the roads. And for everybody checking us out online, just want to say thank you for tuning in. We're just going to get started. And it's Christmas, guys. Christmas is next weekend. Yes. Oh, wow, nobody's excited for Christmas this year? Okay, we're just going to cancel Christmas, I guess, because we're not excited. Christmas is next week, guys. There we go. It's exciting. All right, there we go. Let's get some energy in here. So I'm excited. Christmas next weekend. We got the youth Christmas party tonight, and Christmas is on a Sunday next week. So we're canceling church on Sunday next week. There will be no church Sunday next week. Got it? All right, we're doing church Saturday instead. All right, so it's going to be here, 10 a.m., so it's going to be same time, same thing, except Saturday, Christmas Eve. That way you guys get to spend time with your family and everything. And so Christmas, week away, we're excited. Who has been watching Christmas movies? Not a lot? Okay. Well, I watched my favorite Christmas movie the other night, A Christmas Story. Who's seen that one? I love that Christmas. There's nothing better about watching a story of a little boy and his dream for getting his BB gun. Do we have that picture up, Jeremy? Yes. He wants a Red Ryder BB gun with a carbine action 200 shot range model air rifle with a compass and the stock and this thing that tells time. Oh, it's poetry, isn't it? I love that movie so much. And Christmas is just, it's great. And the Christmas songs, I've been listening to Frank Sinatra and all of the old classic rap at Christmas. It's Bing Crosby. You can't beat those. And it's also great and wonderful, magical. And who's got a nativity set? People kind of still do that. I feel like nativity sets are kind of dwindling out. Yeah, we got a couple of hands. I remember setting on my parents' Christmas set. We actually have, yes, this is the exact set we had growing up in my parents' house. This is what we put up every year. And isn't this, it's just this nice little picture-perfect set. You got sweet little baby Jesus in his manger. I guess mine was a little different because my manger, it was like this wooden, or these two little pallets, and the baby sat on it, and it would always break every year in the cold because it was made out of plastic still. And so we had to makeshift it, and it was taped up. And you get sweet little baby Jesus, and it was all lit up, and you see the shepherd right there. I'd always take his little stick out. It was a little metal stick that kept him in the ground, but I'd take it because, I'm a little boy, and I like to play with things. And so I'd rope the sheep and climb trees with it and, make it my gun or something. And I just enjoy playing with these guys, the three wise men over there. But there's a problem with all this. This isn't how the Christmas story kind of went down. The Christmas story was not this magical story. It was not wonderful. It was not perfect. It was messy. For starters, the three wise men, they weren't even there right then. Theologically, when we look at it, the wise men weren't even in the manger when Jesus was born. And so we have this idea of Christmas always being this magical, special, happy time of the year, when that's not always the case. Christmas can also be messy and difficult. And so we're going to look at Matthew 2 and kind of read a little bit on where the wise men are. And so after King Jesus was born in Judea, Bethlehem, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." So obviously, if you're going to look for a king, where do you go? You go to the palace, right? Because if a baby king is born, you go find the previous king, the current king, and you find out if it's his kid. Well, obviously, it's not King Herod's kid. And so King Herod heard, and he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written." This is now kind of going to the Old Testament this is what the prophets wrote in the Old Testament. "But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rules of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Which is kind of cool because Judah is kind of one of the tribes too. So least town and the least tribe, the ruler of all of Israel will come out of. I think that's pretty cool. So Herod called the Magi secretly, found out from them exact time the star had appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go, search carefully for this child. As soon as you find him, report back to me so that I may go and worship him." That's pretty cool. The king at the time is like, "Hey, yeah, I want to go worship this new baby king too." Okay, Christmas story is still looking pretty good right now, right? We're still pretty good. And after they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place the child was. So this is magical now. You got a star guiding them to where Jesus is. On coming to the house, so right here we see he's not in a manger anymore. He's in a house. And so this is sometime later. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, I don't have a kid, but I don't think you give a baby gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Like, what's a baby going to do with a bunch of money and perfume? To me, that's just weird. There's a comedian, he's a Christian comedian, Tim Hawkins. Joey loves him. They go see him. I think Joey and Michaela are even going to go see him again. And he kind of ruined Christmas for me with one of his jokes when he was talking about the three wise men. And he's like, why would you bring a cold baby that's in a barn, gold, frankincense, and myrrh? Like, give him a blanket. Whose idea was this? And now it just kind of, I have that image now every time is like, yeah, bring a baby gold. That's a great idea. He's going to put that in his mouth right away. So this all doesn't seem so bad. The Magi came to worship Jesus. The king even wanted to come worship Jesus, right? But that's not exactly who King Herod was. King Herod was not a nice guy, all right? This is the guy who, he had many wives. Back in the day, kings had many wives. That was part of what they did. And it was creepy and wrong, all right? And probably the one wife he actually cared for and possibly even loved, he was suspicious of her. Suspicious. She didn't do anything wrong. He was suspicious. So he had her killed and their children killed. This is this kind of king. And so then he gets sick years later, and he's about to die. He's on his deathbed, and he's really sick, and so he decides he's going to try to take his own life and take himself out of this misery he's in. Well, one of the guards stopped him. It failed, but his son, who was supposed to be his successor and his heir to the throne, thought he actually died. So he thought he died, and he's like, well, I'm going to take power now because Dad's dead, so I'm king. So he takes over the kingship and starts doing the duties, the rightful duties he would have needed to do if his dad actually died. Except King Herod didn't die. And when he found out his son did this, he had his son killed. He had his son, who was supposed to take over the throne, who was just doing what he thought probably was right, killed for jumping in too early. And the best part is King Herod died 5 days later. So he had his son killed, who was supposed to take over the kingdom, and 5 days later he died himself. And when he died, he knew he was such a bad king that nobody would care. They'd probably celebrate. So he decided to give an order to kill a bunch of local people who were prominent officials, like somebody who people would actually care about, and had a bunch of people killed so they would be weeping and crying in the streets when he died. That's the kind of king he is. And so now you can imagine this king who is very protective of his throne, who has his own family killed. When he hears there's a baby that's going to be the new king born, and he says he's going to go and worship him, can we believe that now? No, not at all. And so we can jump ahead to Matthew 2:16. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity, who are 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. This guy just killed a bunch of little babies just to try to kill Jesus because he knew he was born. And so Jesus, it says too, all the 2-year-old and under. So Jesus would have been in that age range. So he was older. So that's kind of how we know Magi were not there when Jesus was born. They came later. But this guy is messed up. Does this sound like a happy Christmas story? No. And it's not a happy Christmas story. And we can even recap last week. Pastor Chris explained Mary and Joseph had to travel all this way while Mary was pregnant. Do we have that map up? Yeah. And so I was actually able to go to Israel and go see the country and everything. And so there was 3 major routes that you could head north to south. One was on the coast, One was through Samaria, and then one was on that far right side through the valley. And so, obviously, he explained last week, you don't go through Samaria. That was just something you didn't do. And so the quickest route would have been that long route through hills, mountains. Like Jericho down there, that's like a bunch of hills and mountains right there. It's caverns. That's where we get the parable of, oh, geez, I'm going to blank right now. That's where we get the parable of who is the neighbor, too. And he's talking about the priests and everybody. Pastor Chrissy mentioned that last week, and how they went around the Samaritan who needed help. And this would have been that kind of landscape. It was a very cavernous, very dangerous route to take. And so that's the route Mary and Joseph took. And Mary's pregnant at the time. Like, how many mothers in here who have been pregnant, or maybe are pregnant now, and can you imagine taking a long journey pregnant on the back of a donkey? Who thinks that sounds magical, right? Yeah, this isn't Dumbo ride at Disney World, all right? And this is just not the picture-perfect Christmas story that we all think of. And so when the evil king found out, he didn't want to go worship Jesus. He wanted to kill Jesus. And by the grace of God, God warned the Magi not to go back to him, take a different route. And we learned some more stuff about that, about how God protected Jesus from King Herod. And so if we go back to the same Christmas story, we're going to kind of look at the Bible here. Same Christmas story, Matthew 2. We're going to flip a couple pages here. Now we're in the Old Testament. 2 pages. Do you know what this one little page signifies? 400 years. This is 400 years right now, from Malachi to Matthew. It's 400 years. Do you know what happened in that 400 years? God was silent. God was not there. There was this trend in the Old Testament. It started from Adam and Eve. God did something great. He created the world. Man sinned. Man got punished for that sin. Bad things happened. They repented. God sent somebody, whether it's a prophet, a judge, a king, to redeem the people, bring them back to God. Things were great again. People sinned. Bad things happened. And there was this trend of bad things happening, God saving everybody, people walking away from God, bad things happening. And that was the whole Old Testament. And every time they repented, God sent somebody to save them until we get to the prophets. And when the prophets get here, they're still doing the same thing. They're still trying to save the people and bring them back to God. But they're also prophesying ahead of Jesus and saying there is going to be a new king that's going to come. And he's going to save you all. He's going to redeem you all. And you'll have freedom in him. And so you have this group of people that's expecting this king to come and save them all. And so that's kind of these 400 years of God's silence and absence after all this prophecies and all of this talk of a new king coming. But instead of a new king arriving, you had 400 years without hearing from God. And within that, now you have Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, military genius, conquers all of the known world. Okay, so now Israel's under the Greek control, under Alexander the Great. And then after he died, the Romans took over. So now we're in charge of the Romans, who set King Herod in place. So the Romans are placing things like the crucifixion, King Herod, taxes. This is not sounding good. What's going on in these 400 years? Where are you? This is terrible. And now, because of the Romans, Caesar made the decree for everyone to go back and take the census, which leads Mary on the back of the donkey, going through that route. And it's messy. This all just seems so messy. And when God finally does start to speak again and move in the world, what does he do? He takes a teenage girl, because Mary probably would have been maybe 14, 15 years old, and he said, Mary, you're going to have a baby. Well, Mary's not married yet. It's kind of funny. Mary's not married yet. And so Joseph, the fiance of Mary, who's about to get married to her, now Mary has to come up and say, hey, Joseph, guess what? I'm pregnant, but don't worry, I'm still a virgin. I didn't really do that great at health class, but I don't think it works that way. And so you can imagine this is just kind of all just messed up. And man, what's Joseph going through in all of this? Like, he just found his fiance is pregnant. And not only pregnant, but in a time when if you get pregnant outside of marriage, you're most likely going to get stoned to death. So not only is his fiancée now pregnant with not his kid, but she's also probably going to die because of it. Like, talk about bad times, bad days. Like, all right, God, you're finally moving, and this is how you move? And you wonder what's going on in all this. And what's God doing? This is all so messy and, filled with all these bad days and bad times of people coming over and conquering the world. The Romans taking over, taxing everybody. Who likes taxes, right? I love taxes. They're the best. And this is all just going on right now. And who else can relate to having some bad days, right? Some messy days where life just feels messy and it feels like it's all right in front of your face and you can't see past it. And let me tell you about, this past couple of months for me. Back in August, I lost my job at a church. That was rough. That hurt. That took a lot out of me. And so I was communicating with Pastor Chris, and I moved here, and I was working for a little bit in a kind of a temporary situation. It didn't really work out, which I think it worked out for the best that way. I'm still friends. And so now I'm jobless, living in a basement with a cat. That's where I'm at. And I've been jobless till about Thanksgiving, when I finally got a temporary job working third shift in a factory. Now, it's not the worst job in the world, but it's not exactly what I came to Manitowoc to do either. And here I am now. Okay, finally I do have a job again, but it's not one I want. It doesn't really pay that well, but it's a job, but it's also working night shift. So this past week, when I've been having to prepare this message, I've also been going in every night and not sleeping at all. And for the first time in a couple of years, I got a cold this week. Right? And I know, it's fine, it's just a cold. But I never get sick, so like to me, working nights, not sleeping, it's like I'm just drained every day. And so this is my week. It just feels so messy, right? And some of you are kind of laughing at me, and it's like, yeah, that's messy. Let me tell you about my week this week. Let me tell you about my life. You're right? And so there's messier times. Maybe you lost somebody this year. Maybe, you don't have that loved one in your life anymore. Financially, maybe you're struggling. Maybe you don't even have a job right now. Maybe you don't have a home. You're not able to provide presents under the tree. Maybe you don't even have a tree this year. This year is rough for you, and this Christmas may not be that perfect magic Christmas. It's going to be really hard. You're going to be missing something this Christmas. And I think that's what this Christmas story is all about, is to come in and say, in all this mess, and when you hear God's silence, when God's silent in your life, and you feel his absence, that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. It's okay to feel God's silence and feel his absence. That's not wrong to feel that way. Now, to live that way is a different story. If you walk around and you act like God isn't there, now that's where depression leads in. But when we feel this way, that's okay, because we can feel this way at times. But that's where faith comes in, and we need to trust that even though we can't hear God and see God, he's still there. Because, and all honestly, like, if I had you guys all close your eyes right now and I stopped talking, you wouldn't hear me and you wouldn't feel me, right? Because that's weird if I was touching you. And, right? Amen, I'm not touching you. And so, but I'm still here. You know I'm still here, right? I didn't leave the room. It's the same thing with God. Sometimes if we don't see him and we don't feel him, it doesn't mean he's absent from my life. He's still right there with us. And we know God has a plan in all this, and he's working it all out for his good and his glory. And so God has a plan. I constantly think, I got this. I can do it my way. I can do it better. And how often does that end up working out and succeeding? Right? It's probably for me never. That's usually when I break something, or Joey can contest to that whenever we were joking around, he's like, whenever I say I got this, usually something breaks. And so we look at all this story and we look at all this mess and we think, why God? And so, because of this 400 years of silence, because all this happened, God set up the perfect Christmas story. In all this messiness, it was the perfect Christmas story. Because in those 400 years, Alexander the Great came and conquered the world. Do you know what he brought when he conquered the world? Koine Greek, which all of the known world now spoke Koine Greek. So he brought a unified common language to everyone in the known world at the time. And after that, the Romans, they brought a lot of things. One of the things they brought are the Roman roads and the road system. And they policed and guarded the roads. So instead of Mary and Joseph taking that long journey through dangerous territory of robbers, now they're going to have maybe more of a paved road where it's actually going to be stones, as well as they're going to be safer. So they're not going to have as much fear from robbers and different people attacking them on their travels. So what did God do in these 400 years? He established a way for when Jesus came that we communicate the gospel and the good news of who Jesus was and what he does to our life. We can now communicate that farther and faster and to everyone in the known world. That's what God did in 400 years of silence. And then we also look at it too, and we look at the Christmas story, and we think, okay, go back. This is also messy. Why would the Magi go and warn King Herod for all this to happen? Well, it's because part of the prophecy is Jesus came out of Egypt. And so when they found out that Herod wanted to kill Jesus, the angels warned Joseph to take them and flee to Egypt. And anybody know that moving or going somewhere else, going into a different country costs some money, right? Because you're also going to go away from where you're working. So the Magi now giving a baby gold and expensive perfumes is starting to make sense, right? At the time, you're thinking, what is going on? But now if you take a step back and you're looking at what the story is, you're starting to figure out that God's got a plan for all this. God has a purpose for all this. And they were able to flee to Egypt. Jesus was able to grow up in safety. And Egypt was a very wealthy area where they was very knowledgeable too. And they were able to teach Jesus a lot of things. He was able to learn there and be very educated. And so in our times where we feel like it's all just messy and everything's bad going on in our lives, we know God has a plan in our life. And you sit here this Christmas and you think, man, my life is just so messy this year. My life is so messy. This is just not going to be a good Christmas. And so the story this week, is that in all this mess and in all this pain, that when we hear God's silence and we feel his absence, we can trust his presence. We can trust that he's there, that he's working something in our lives. Because he's proven it. He's proven it in the Bible time and time again, that when we can't necessarily see something going wrong, or we can't see past the mess that's in our face, there's still something greater beyond that. And that's the message God wanted to share this week. As we wrap up this week and close, and the worship team can come up and get ready. I'm ending early, so praise God, right? You know, some things work out pretty good. And so, but yeah, this is a really weighted message this week because people are going to have a rough Christmas, may have a rough Christmas. And God just wants to tell you this week that he's here. He's right beside you in all this mess. He knows it's hard right now. He knows this mess is hard. He knows it's difficult. And while preparing for this, I don't remember where I heard it, but somebody put it in this way too. Just recently, I went and visited my family. My sister just had a little baby. And I was able to hold her little baby. And somebody put it in this way. God sent his one son, his only son, down to earth as a baby to a teenage girl in a barn. That's what he did. And so can you imagine God looking down at his baby in this teenage girl's arms, surrounded by cows, and you know else what cows do, and surrounded in all this, and he's looking down at this baby, knowing what this baby is going to have to go through, knowing this baby is going to have to get on that cross, shed out all his blood for our sins. A baby. That's a Christmas story. That's rough. And we have all this messiness in our lives. And God is just saying, in all of this, trust that I'm here. Trust that I got a plan. Because if Jesus wouldn't have shed all his blood, if he wouldn't have done all that, we would not be free. See, Jesus fulfilled everything they said. Jesus came down so he could be our king and free us. But he didn't free us politically. He didn't free us in a world. He freed us spiritually, so that we can have eternity in heaven and we wouldn't have any more pain, any more suffering. God did exactly what he said he was going to do. And through this all, when it's hard, we're going to get through this together. Whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's in 50 years, we're going to get through this. These hard times aren't going to be right in front of us. We're going to get past it. We're going to grow past it. And in all this mess, I really want you guys to take this away this week. In all this mess, when we hear God's silence and feel his absence, trust his presence. Have faith that he's working in your life and that he's there for you guys. Because he is. And he has a plan and he's working in your lives right now. And even though in all this mess, he's there, he's working, and he's right beside you through it all.